Hey, what's going on, guys? Mike Glover here. This is on Mike Glover Stories. Typically, I post this on my Patreon for all members. It's my Q&A that I do monthly for paid members, tiers 1, 2, and 3. But because I'm asking questions from my Patreon group and that answer might provide some value to you guys, I'm going to offer this on my YouTube channel, Mike Glover Stories. So let's get into it. Let's start off with Dakota. He says, hey, Mike, when the housing market crashes, a lot of people will be looking to buy. As a prepper myself, what are some things to look at when buying a house to make it safer or more so a fortress? A steep, long driveway, so it's harder for an intruder to access my property. No windows on the front side of the house, so no one can shoot through it. No glass doors, things like this. Thanks, man. So Dakota, a couple things. The location of your house in vicinity to other houses and also whether or not you're in the city or the county matter. If you're in the county, the zoning is different. I would recommend being in the county on the outskirts of the city limits. One, if you're in the city limits, there's more restrictions. It's like living in a neighborhood with HOA, except the HOA is the government. And I'm not a big fan of the government, period. And I don't want more regulation. I want less. I live in the county, for example, and I have wells. Like I have 7 wells tethered to pumps that pump out water and distribute to 7 different families. So we're off of a legacy family well. Well, why is that important? Well, in the worst case scenario, when the infrastructure collapses because everything's connected to the grid, including electricity through the hydroelectric dam, as well as the water infrastructure, which is Heber Light and Power and Heber Water, then you're not going to get water in the city. But also you're affected by that if you're in the county and you're on your own well, because wells sometimes fail. So if you want more self-reliance, get something on the outskirts of town. And specifically about the house, it really just depends, man. There's not much you could do on the building of an existing structure because generally speaking, depending on the year they were built, the decade they were built the same. And so you're going to have front-facing windows. You're going to have a specific type of driveway. What I would recommend is looking for a house that has standoff from the main road. What you don't want to be, like me, is right off of a road. Now, I'm not off of a main road, but because the development of the area, it's become a thoroughfare. And I don't like that, which is why I'm likely going to eventually sell and get somewhere more on the outskirts. If you have to live in a neighborhood, I would down select in a cul-de-sac at a minimum with no HOA. Again, you don't want restrictions. Something else to look for, which is not often discussed, is the type of material that your house is built with. I mean, you could look this up on YouTube. There's plenty of examples of this. But depending on the year your house was built, if it was built, for example, in the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, and beyond, there were certain raw materials that were used to build your house that were very good, a lot stronger, but also bad because of things like the insulation that was put in the walls, the lead paint that was painting the walls. The list goes on. So, for example, in Colorado, I had a really old, not old, but built in the 70s log cabin, and there was a thread of asbestos. And there's also a thread of radon, because in Colorado, you deal with that. So I needed to do radon mitigation, inspect it to make sure it didn't have asbestos anywhere. I hope I'm saying that right. And in my newer house that was built in the 90s, well, there's some drawbacks because it's not a stick home like what's being built now, which is basically plywood. I mean, pressed wood. But you'll find more advantages in the building of the house with older homes, as long as the safety concerns are mitigated. Those are just general rules of advice. Obviously, you have to take a look at it. Obviously, you have to be comfortable with it, but those are just general things that I would say. If you get a house with a little bit of land, you don't need 20 acres. You could build a homestead on 1 acre just get a land that's house is recessed back from the main road. That would be a huge recommendation, and that's what I would do. Doug says, favorite folding pocket knives. That's easy. Benchmade makes the best folding pocket knives. I think I have 3 different variations. They have an aluminum one. They have a bug out one that's really cool. Benchmade by far, I've carried Benchmade 20 plus years, by far is the best folding knife. JP says, hey, Mike, was wondering if you could share your take on food sovereignty at home or community-wise. Not sure what you mean sovereignty-wise. I imagine you mean like having it on hand. So I just shared this with American Contingency. So thanks for asking this question. It's fresh on my mind. One, if you have a network of a community, family, friends in the vicinity, geographically around you, which is one thing I always recommend, right? Because people always say, I have family and friends. Well, how close are they? If you have family down in the valley and they're an hour away, you don't have an immediate resource for allocating, collecting, or collectively your assets. So if John is going to stockpile the water because he has land and you're going to stockpile the food because you have a cellar and you're an hour apart, that's not advantageous geographically. So team up with your neighbors in your community to distribute what you're going to do based on the assets that you have, the capacity and capabilities that you have, and then share that burden together. So at a minimum, you need as much food, water, hygiene, and prescription drugs on hand as you can contain. There's not a 60-day rule, a 90-day rule, a 120-day rule, a year rule. It's as much as you can contain. The general rule of thumb is when I'm thinking about food storage, I'm taking or consuming the front end of the inventory and stockpiling the back end. That's generally how it should work. So you're not stockpiling the fridge, you're eating out of the fridge, and then you're pulling off the shelf in the pantry and stockpiling the back end of the pantry. So you have 3 different segments. You have what you eat, what you store temporarily in your pantry, and what you store long term. Mine, I have a fridge, a deep, large chest freezer, a large pantry, and then a shipping container with the 25-year shelf life. Because the reality is you need to eat the things that you're going to like to eat. You don't want to be in a worst case scenario eating 25-year shelf life food that is garbage. I'll tell you from firsthand experience, 25-year shelf life food is garbage. There's a reason why 25-year shelf life food lasts 25 years. It's because it's cardboard. Now, camping food is something that I would have in my pantry because as you go camping and you're eating the front end, I'm replenishing the back end. So each segment, fridge, pantry to shipping container, and the shipping container could be your cellar, it could be a closet. It's more longer term things that are going to be sitting on the shelf for a long time. Also, consider canning and jarring because if you can and jar as a family, you're food prepping together, you're learning, you're eating the food that you like, and also canning 5+ years, jarring 2+ years. It's advantageous to have that on hand, eat the front end, replenish the back end. I hope that makes sense. Chris says, as an active duty Marine, my understanding of Green Berets was very minimal. After coming home, I struggled with many things, including alcoholism, rage, PTSD. Same. Many years were wasting, spiraling out of control. Then along came the woman of my life. The last year or so, I started watching military podcasts such as Sean Ryan, Nick the Machine. It was then I realized to some extent what the primary mission of Green Berets is. My question is, with the utmost respect to you, and the reverence is, with force multiplying objectives, the odds of said force after arming them and training them of turning on you are much higher than not. What are y'all's contingencies when this happens? What do you do to minimize these threats? It took me a long time to be able to ask you this, but your knowledge on this matter is the only one I care to get. Chris, thanks for your service. Thanks for your honesty. And absolutely, I'll answer this question easily. So I've trained a lot of indigenous host nation forces across the world. And depending on the situation, via the rapport that we were building and the circumstances or the main objective of why we were building them, determine how much access to equipment, especially armament, weapons, and ammo, and honestly, the security parameters that we would have on hand just in case we had this, I think they call it blue or green on blue type of deal. So I have personal friends that were shot in these type of attacks by indigenous forces. I have very profound experience in dealing with the controversies and ethical and moral dilemmas of this situation as well. Generally speaking, my overall experience is positive. Most of the indigenous forces or the host nation forces that I've trained overseas were bought in, meaning they were highly vetted, trained, assessed, selected. That's completely out of order. But essentially, they were the right guys for the job. The Iraqi counterterrorism force is a great example. Those guys, you didn't have to worry about shooting you in the back of the head in a gunfight because we selected them, we vetted them, we trained them, and we conducted bilateral combat operations with them year after year. One of the biggest mistakes that organizations make when they're building a host nation force is they forget their time is temporary. They rotate out with another group, another unit, and then that unit tries to reinvent the wheel. A great example would be when Navy SEALs used to work with indigenous forces because at the time, at least, it wasn't their main job. They typically did unilateral operations. They didn't do foreign internal defense or the training of indigenous forces. They didn't understand how to build rapport. And they were disrespectful to most of the indigenous forces, and they treated them very poorly. I found myself with many of my teammates many times telling these young Navy SEALs with the average age of 22 to 25 that if you want to die on target and get shot in the back of the head by an indigenous force with an AK-47, continue to treat them that way. Treat them with respect and build rapport. My experiences in Afghanistan were very different because many of the indigenous forces that we were building, we weren't able to long-term objectively train them for a reputable force that was going to be around for a long time. It was temporary, and we knew it was temporary. And that's where we saw a lot of problems, a lot of issues. I've run counterterrorism programs in Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa, on and on. What I've found overall is the best tactic is to have a highly comprehensive vetting process, build that rapport, drink that chai, break bread, even pray with them, and also have the ability to overwatch and provide security in the worst case scenario. If we suspected that there were potential players that we've developed intel on, or we just got the feeling, the intuition that potentially they could turn their guns on us, we would immediately move them out of the organization. Or we would continue to intimately vet them. Or we would provide overwatch or security just in case. I've been in some really finicky, fragile situations in this, and it's not fun, but it's part of the job. I hope I provided some insight into that question for you. Again, thank you for your service, and I hope you're doing a lot better. It seems like the woman of your life might have saved your life, and I'm proud of you, man. Dan says, picking up on Hewitt's question, besides a good fit in your hand, can you explain the importance of the red dot and if you favor one kind over another? With a red dot, I don't need to use glasses at all. It helped me a lot. I know some of the guys are more traditional than others. I prefer whatever works best for me. Sure, Dan. There's a really easy explanation for red dots, and they're actually a lot of the times they're misunderstood and why red dots are a benefit, especially on a pistol. So if I took a pistol with a red dot and I was running a firearms instruction block of instruction for patrol officers that are going through the academy, and we're doing basic pistol marksmanship, and I handed cadets pistols with red dots that were zeroed, and I had them shoot a 25-meter bullseye target, slow aim fire, 10 rounds, 10 minutes. You would see exponentially higher scores than if we were using iron sights. Part of the reason is because of the simple fact that you have a red dot, a point of reference on your pistol that you overlay on the target, and despite trigger control being one of the fundamentals of marksmanship, as long as the red dot's somewhere on the target as a point of reference and they press the trigger and they break that shot, it's going to land somewhere in that NRA bullseye 25-yard target, generally speaking, as compared to a front sight. The problem that you run into, it's not a problem, it's just how it works, is if you're using front sight focus to align on a target, the target behind the front sight is blurry. The time that it takes you to evolve your depth of field from target to front sight, just like a camera, just like an optic that's changing its variable magnification, it takes time. It takes time. So the lesson learned there is a lot of people think, because of red dots, I would say on rifles, that when they're holding a pistol in their hand, that they need to take their field of focus, their depth of field from the target to the red dot to get it really refined before they break the shot. Now, in national rifle marksmanship, you're shooting an NRA bull, 25-yard bullseye target, any kind of basic pistol marksmanship, sure, when following the fundamentals of marksmanship and slow aim fire. But the benefit here is in self-defense, you could maintain target focus using, I'm placating with words here just to generalize it, using the red dot in the background of your vision to overlay on the target while you're identifying the target in a clear depth of field or in focus. A prime example would be, let's say you're a police officer and you draw your weapon to mitigate the risk by telling the person to show me your hands because of the circumstance. So you have the pistol presented, the red dots overlaid on the suspect, and you're watching the suspect's hands, right? Well, if you had iron sights and you wanted to refine your focus, you couldn't use a blurry front and rear focus in the background of your vision. I mean, you could, if you're trained to do that, you could, certainly. Many officers are trained to do that. But the benefit is now I could look at the suspect. I have the red dot floating in the background of my vision. A good way to think about this is you're looking at me, you hold your finger. I'm left eye dominant, so you'll see it over my left eye. You hold your finger out. I'm looking at me. There is a finger in between me looking at me, but I'm in focus, not my finger. If I have to break the shot, I could break the shot with a red dot in reference on the target. The debate whether or not a red dot is faster and more accurate, I would say, has been plenty debunked. It's the reason why counterterrorism organizations, more law enforcement officers and agencies are utilizing it. But because old dogs like old habits, they don't like to migrate. It took me forever to migrate. And I still, in a way, prefer iron sights over red dots because depending on the pistol, I have to worry about the height over bore, the specific zero on that pistol. And for iron sights, I can go pistol to pistol and I know exactly the frame of reference. With all of that being said, I think there is an advantage of using a red dot. And it varies from, again, the idea of close proximity self-defense and shooting beyond using a rifle with a red dot, for example, where there would be different characteristics, which I could explain to you later. I hope I was pretty comprehensive with that because I try to be on these Q&As. All right, guys, so that's part 1 of the Q&A. I'm actually going to offer this up on YouTube on my Mike Glover stories. Every once in a while, I'll put these Q&As up. I'll also offer it to all members for the Q&A. If you're a paid member, tiers 1 through 3, feel free to ask because I'll do a part 2 of this. I appreciate you guys. Thanks, guys.